Hello, my name is Heather Currey. Thank you for the opportunity to present this quantitative research assessment. This is our agenda for the presentation. We'll start with defining research design standards. We'll then move on to discuss data analysis and scholarly research. Once we've covered those baseline items, we'll review an assessment of the presented article in terms of approach, methodology, and philosophical perspectives. Once we've reviewed the presented article, we'll do the same for an alternative article. We'll then take a look at overall scoring for the presented and alternately suggested articles. Finally, we'll wrap up with recommendations associated with moving forward. Let's get started. There are many different components of research design. As recommended by UMUC, there are generally 7 areas. First, research purpose. The research purpose needs to be present, have need established, be supported by literature, be clear, and should guide the article content. Second, the research should indicate research philosophy, if not directly stated. It should exhibit ontology, epistemology, and axiology. More importantly, the philosophy should be internally consistent throughout the research. Variables in a research should be named, defined, operationalized, applied consistently, and the relationships of the variables should be explained. Continuing on with research design standards, specifically the data analysis components. External validity measures include sample size, sample composition, sample bias, and should always indicate ethical treatments of subjects. Internal validity addresses whether the research is theoretically and empirically linked, if the content is valid, and if it's tied to the author's conceptual definition. Internal validity also includes pre-testing, reliability reporting, and should indicate if there are any links to conclusions. The descriptive statistics of research include appropriate central tendency of measure, provides a clear summary, provides assumptions for advanced analysis, and includes participant demographics. The last component, inferential statistics, includes a total of 7 sub-areas. They are providing fit data and research purpose, ensuring non-causal implications of correlation, meeting necessary assumptions, ensuring significance is correctly interpreted, that the alpha levels are consistently used, and that statistical meaning as well as practical meanings of the analysis are discussed. Now that there's a better understanding of standard research design, we can move forward with discussing research philosophical perspectives and approaches. While these are 2 separate elements of research, it will be clear in the next slide just how they're connected. You may recall research philosophy was addressed as a standard in the research design. There are 3 elements to the research philosophy: the ontological, the epistemological, and the axiological. The ontological perspective indicates how the information is seen or not seen. In layman's terms, if one is not there to see it, does it happen? The epistemological perspective indicates how much data and observation influences the research, spanning the objective to subjective spectrum. Last, the axiological perspective deals with to what extent the researcher's own values are incorporated into the research. The 3 approaches include critical, focusing on critiques, qualitative, focusing on case and content studies, and quantitative, including surveys and experiments. As previously noted, there's a relationship between philosophical perspectives and research approaches. Critical research approaches tend to have more socially constructive, observational, subjective research philosophies. On the other end of the approach continuum, quantitative research tends to be empirically driven, data-derived, and objective. The qualitative approach falls somewhere in between the approach on the continuum, blending social and empirical constructs, combining data with observation, and where the researcher allows some subjectivity to creep into their research. The next critical element in quantitative research is the data analysis. In most research, data analysis is presented as figures, percentages, graphs, and histograms. While descriptive statistics describes and synthesizes data to show patterns and trends, inferential statistics permit the investigator to infer whether relationships noted in a sample might occur in a larger population. To ensure proper analysis, it is imperative that the researcher perform due diligence in defining and understand the descriptive and inferential statistic information of their research. Reliable significance and central tendency, as well as have an established confidence and validity associated with the data. These measures assess significance of the results, or rather the chance of effects randomly happening. It helps to establish boundaries and acceptable range, helps to establish how true the estimate of that range is, and how spread out the data is. These elements, if not carefully defined, considered, and executed, can create misleading research. In addition to the approach, philosophy, and data elements of research, there is the style of quantitative research to consider. There are 4 styles of research according to Ingram-Broomfield: descriptive, correlational, experimental, and quasi-experimental. These styles also lie on the objective to subjective-based continuum, noting that descriptive is the most objective and observational style, while quasi-experimental is the most subjective with having advanced knowledge. The proposed article, Achieving High Organization Performance Through Servant Leadership, is said to be a quantitative research study. After reviewing, it appears to be more of a qualitative research article, given the amount of literature review included, the a priori interview selection process, and that the author seems to intermittently weigh their own opinion by noting statements with no literature or empirical support. The research philosophy is not consistent throughout the article, but to best summarize, it seems as though the ontology is blended. There are empirical and social constructs throughout the article. The epistemology is blended as well, consistently combining data with observations in the analysis, and as previously noted, the axiology is somewhat subjective, as exampled by the multiple statements throughout the article. Since the article is noted as a quantitative research article, it is suggested that the style of research is quasi-experimental, given the a priori interviews and the convenient sampling leverage. An overall review of the proposed article highlights a number of gaps. First, and possibly most importantly, the organization of the article is difficult to follow. It is not clear if there are particular elements of the research given the organization. The philosophy of the research is inconsistent. Based on the research approach, the reader should expect a more objective, data-driven research article, but is left with a mixed impression of whether the researcher's own opinions, literature review, or data drove the results of the study. The variables were not well named and defined, which set the remainder of the data analysis to fail. It was difficult to follow the research design, as there were critical internal and external validity elements lacking, including central tendency and original sample size. The study noted a rater who interpreted the responses of the survey but did not disclose the qualifications of said rater, which leads the reader to question the validity of the qualitative interviews to begin with. Likely as a result of the dependent and independent variables not being well defined, the inferential statistics are incorrect, as the degrees of freedom should represent the standard normal variables that appear in the sum and should not be as distinct and high as they are represented in the dataset. Further, a significance level was not established in the study and should not be used to determine hypothesis acceptance or rejection. Keeping in mind quantitative research elements and the investment in the interest of servant leadership, an effort was made to identify and select an alternate article option. Those efforts produced the article, Impact of Transformational and Servant Leadership on Organizational Performance, a Comparative Analysis. The article presents clearly as a descriptive, quantitative research article with an empirical, data-driven, objective philosophy. The alternate article presented organized, succinct, and easy to follow. It clearly established research purpose and consistently followed an objective and empirically driven philosophy. The variables are well named, defined, and operationalized, as well as consistently applied. The majority of the external and internal validity measures were met, as were the descriptive and inferential statistics measures. When looking at the article scored side by side using the research criteria outlined earlier in this presentation, it is clear where the gaps of the proposed article and where the value is added of the alternate article. Based on what has been presented, it is recommended that the board move forward with servant leadership, as it is supported by solid research. It is also recommended, however, that the progress is made with the alternate article to support efforts, given the details of both articles presented today. It is further recommended that the board leverages a research article scoring matrix to ensure consistency in research selection moving forward. As this presentation has shared, not all articles, research, and analysis are created equal. Thank you so much for giving your time and attention to this presentation. You'll see a list of references here in the event there needs to be additional review or research done on this topic.